Hey, it's the Road Show. We're back. Anybody do a cars and coffee over the weekend? And if so, what makes a good cars and coffee? Like, that wasn't even a thing, right? Like 10, 20 years ago.
Do you know, when I was in
I
It
just called
was
it
in
hanging out
Southern
in a parking
California.
lot. I don't know.
Oh,
It was in California.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
had the original, Crystal Cove Cars and Coffee, which is like
Is
the
that
ultimate,
the genesis
if you know,
of that?
if you know.
Okay. So where's Crystal Cove, and when did this start?
So Crystal Cove is in Orange County. It's on the coast between Corona del Mar and Laguna Beach. And there's a shopping center there. And it started in the very early 2000s.
Okay.
And people started, there's a Starbucks there, and it's kind of a one-sided open air, like very upscale strip mall with an ocean view. And so we'd go to the parking lot and you'd be having a cars and coffee on the coast.
Yeah.
And, on one side it's the Pacific Ocean and on the other side is incredible cars. And it grew and grew. And I remember going and, Dan Gurney was there with his
Wow.
All-American Racers. He and his sons would ride their motorcycles down.
is that what became
And
the
just walk around.
San Clemente Cars and Coffee eventually, or is that a different one?
Say that again.
Is that what became the San Clemente Cars and Coffee, or was that another one?
I don't know what the progression is with the San Clemente one. I'm not as familiar with that one.
I
The Crystal
thought
Cove.
I thought that was the original one, and for me, that's when, like, recently spending some time in the US, living there, it was my first experience of real sort of cars and coffee scene, and I just cannot believe every Saturday how many cars, like, it's such a vast range, high value, people's pride and joy come out, and for me, it was like, I can't imagine life without it now. And coming back to the UK, I've reached out to friends and I'm like, right, hook me up. Where is the scene? I need to get this on my weekly fix. And and there are some really good ones around, but I've got to travel a little bit further, and they're a little bit smaller. Obviously, in England, most things are smaller. And to answer your question, Ryan, what makes a good cars and coffee? I can, without doubt, I know it has to have coffee, I know it has to have cars, but the ingredient is sunshine, and that makes
Yes.
Ocean view's nice too, right?
yeah.
So,
Right.
so Lindsay, you said so you were there from the get-go?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there, and where the Crystal Cove shopping center basically is, where it was held, just down below on the sand, there was a mobile home park that had been there for decades, and my family was lucky enough to have one. So when we were
Really?
there, we could walk up to the Cars and Coffee.
like a 60s television detective, you had a trailer down on the beach.
I did, yeah. Oceanfront trailer.
That's fantastic.
It's good work if you can get it. So
And
that had been my grandparents had the spot. So my dad grew
Amazing.
up there. I got to grow up there. And then Crystal Cove was put in the development. Crystal Cove itself is also a collection of cottages which are still there today.
Huh.
And so it was just directly on the other side of PCH was the shopping center. And so sometimes we would drive down if we weren't at the trailer, or we would just walk up. And so it was there for several years. And then there are homes just above the shopping center. And so eventually there was, frustration from the homeowners, as happens frequently. And so then they moved it to the Ford headquarters in Irvine, which was the headquarters of the Premier Automotive Group when they had Lincoln and Jaguar and Range Rover.
Okay.
Or Land Rover.
Those halcyon days. Yeah.
Right. And so that was hosted by John Kleinert and his wife Linda. And John has been with Ford for 52 years this year. And they hosted it every Saturday for 8 years.
Huh.
Then they started to go back to Crystal Cove for a couple years. And then, Alan, I think you know better than I do as far as the history of the San Clemente gathering, but that may have grown out of when they had to leave Crystal Cove again.
Right. Okay. And also that original location in Crystal Cove. Now it's obviously there's a very fancy restaurant, Javier's there. So in the evening, it's a different bit of car watching. There's the valet collects many Lamborghinis and Range Rovers and Bentleys as people are valeting in the evening to head off with their partner. wife
Right.
is
And,
not sure,
Maybach
but,
is standard and
Yeah,
exactly. So it's a
supercars,
different watch.
hypercars. Yeah, you can go any weekend night to either Javier's. There's a Mastro's there. There's some
Yep.
other restaurants on the inside. Javier's and Mastro's are on the coast, like right along PCH. And, it's like they say, any given Sunday, it's a car show outside.
Yeah, yeah. Every weekend, every weekend.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's fascinating. I had no idea that you were a part of that. That was sort of the genesis of that. It's amazing how quickly that's taken off. I think there are probably a couple other groups that might argue they were pretty early on as well. But I've heard that story too about that group. So sounds
Well,
legit
Lindsay,
to
you
me.
also were very much involved or active in the Malibu sort of car scene as well, weren't you? I think you've got quite a network up there and have visited or frequented several
Right.
car gatherings. So how did that come about?
Yeah, Malibu Kitchen. But Ryan, I think to your point, you're right. Donut Derelicts in Huntington Beach, I think, is probably the original.
Interesting.
And that's a pre-dawn gathering that's been going on also
Okay.
for decades.
Okay.
It started as, 2 or 3 friends that would go. There's a
Yeah,
coffee shop or donut shop in Huntington, and they would just go and get a cup of coffee and hang out for an hour and then go home.
Sure.
And that has grown and grown and grown. And so a lot of times people will start there now, and then they'll go to, Finish Line or
Okay.
whatever the next Cars and
Yeah.
Coffee, or they'll go down to the San Clemente Cars and Coffee, the South
Yeah.
Orange County one.
And Alan mentioned Malibu, and that's one, I think every one of us here on this call has been lucky enough to attend at least once. But that was
Right.
pretty early on, too, and of course made famous by, the celebrities and all that.
Right.
And you were part of that. And
Yes, I got to
again,
experience that several times. And, one of the things we all talk about that's so wonderful about the car world is the connections. And I didn't even know until the first time I was heading up there that my family knows the people that used to own Malibu Kitchen through the car
Really?
world. Yeah.
When's that new
Yeah,
restaurant coming along?
So the cookies are available at the
Okay.
farmers market in Malibu, and then
Okay.
they're also in a couple restaurants in Malibu.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It remains to be seen if they're able to open a new permanent
Yeah,
spot. And of
yeah.
course, those of us that
Can
got to experience it and love it would love to see that. But
Absolutely.
In the meantime, we'll enjoy the cookies.
I can imagine opening a new restaurant in Malibu is no small task. So it's interesting. You mentioned driving from one to another as well, and I feel like we're sort of seeing an evolution of the cars and coffee. I feel like there's, I don't know what we did before that, but I feel like it's now evolving to more of a driving thing. There's like this driving component, right? That happens with a lot of them. You either start at the cars and coffee, you end up at the cars and coffee. I feel like. Like Newcomb's Ranch is sort of, that encapsulated, right, where it becomes a little more experiential.
Right.
I'm not big on like hanging out in a parking lot, right? That's just, if I have a couple of hours, I want to go for a drive. I mean, I guess it's better than nothing. And I think a lot of this probably came out of COVID too, right? A lot of it became more popular.
Definitely.
But I like the direction that things are going because I like that driving element of it as well. Seattle, Dan, you when it's not raining,
Yeah.
You
Before
hang
we
out in
get to
parking
Seattle,
lots.
can I just give a shout out? Does anyone have a copy of the latest Road and Track?
that's
No,
a
not
great
yet.
mention. I don't have it. I want one. Lindsay, you've got to
I
have
want to
one.
get one too.
Is this
Yeah.
one where he mentions the drives and the roads and locations, or
The front cover
It's
is
the
Newcomb's
cover.
Ranch.
Yeah,
They did a profile of Good Vibes.
which is pretty
amazing.
awesome.
Right.
I
Yeah.
saw on Instagram too that Jay and Nicole are recording with Matt and Zach today. So
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
forward
that's
to
amazing.
see
I
that.
can't wait to hear it. Well,
And
I don't know if
Jay
you guys
at Sheffield
saw,
Watches.
Sheffield is doing
Yeah.
a fund. They're selling the yellow version of their watch as a fundraiser for Jay and Nicole. So everybody go buy one.
amazing.
It's awesome. $60.
cool.
I mean, how can you go
Right.
wrong? I just
Yeah.
hope that he's made enough because
It'll
it'll sell
sell
it
out
pretty
for sure.
quickly.
I
Yeah,
like that.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
somebody commented. I saw they're like, I'm going to try and get one, and I thought that's a good point because it is going to sell out, especially
Yeah.
knowing that it's for such a good cause and people that we know and love.
Well, and Jay's become sort of a celebrity in his own right. I feel like, right?
Right.
It's so
Well,
neat
they
to
both-
sort of
yeah, they
see
both
all these
have.
connections, and yeah, absolutely. And Now that's kind of like peak Cars and Coffee, right? Because you kind of have, we talked about what makes a good Cars and Coffee, and I feel like that's got all. It doesn't have the ocean view, right? But it's got a great scenic view. It's got that destination, right? Newcomb's Ranch, if you don't know, was used in all kinds of movies, right? Because it's really a cool place, scenic place, right?
It has so much history. It's such an incredible story,
history.
just the place itself. But like you said, Ryan, it has kind of combines the best of both worlds, because you go up, it's an incredible, gathering of cars, really unique group of people, and everybody's approachable and friendly and, kind of like instant friends, because you start out with this common interest of cars.
Yeah.
But it also is a really cool drive to get there.
Yep. No, I think that's essential.
So how
we
many
don't have
EVs
anything quite like that in Colorado. But
how many EVs are we seeing at car shows nowadays? Then is it still the internal combustion engine, or are we seeing some interesting EVs starting to penetrate?
I think both. We're starting to see EVs.
Yep.
Wasn't it Johnny that said, he was the fastest guy up the mountain in that new Lucid, right? I mean,
right?
Was it 1,400 horsepower or something outrageous?
Yeah, but, I can't remember what.
How can you not get excited about that?
I know.
It's an interesting car.
Well,
it's a
Lucid
really
has always been known for their incredible acceleration.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Colorado doesn't have anything quite like Angeles Crest, Newcomb's Ranch, but so even living here with such great roads, that's still like something to aspire to. Like I still get excited when we go there. Dan and I didn't quite make it the last time we were there, but we tried.
You guys got a good story out of it, though.
We did. I'd never been so close to so many huge helicopters. You ever ever end up with any tickets? Go ahead, Dan.
I was just saying we were stopped at the border. We almost got to the, but they didn't realise who we were and thought we were just two Joes in a Maserati, so they wouldn't let us to the top, unfortunately.
Did you ever get any tickets in the mail after that trip, Dan? Are you good?
No, but I did move house quite recently afterwards, didn't I? So dodging them, I think.
That's a
good planning
technique, Hey, we touched on electrics a bit. There's this Hyundai Ioniq 6. Do you all know this car?
Yep.
This is the car that is. It's very. You either love it or you hate it. Yeah, it's polarizing. That's the word. Yeah. It is the car that, on first glance, kind of looks like a turtle. On second glance, you start to see some Porsche in it. But basically, it's their sedan. It's their electric mid-size sedan. I hated this thing when it came out. I thought this was the ugliest. It just kind of looked like a lump.
And now you don't think it's ugly, or something?
Now I kind of like it. What is that? Am I getting old? Am I losing my enthusiast cred?
Something, isn't it?
No.
It's forced on you so much, you start to like it.
Maybe that's it. It's kind of Stockholm
the initial
syndrome.
shock. I think that happens with a lot of cars where when they come out, everybody goes, and then once you kind of get used to it, you come around.
They don't sponsor it, so I can be completely honest. And I have learned as I've got older, to never say never. But if you see me in that car, then it's a cry for help. It really is. It's horrendous. I don't know if I
could
could
probably come up with going on.
Yeah,
I was trying to copy a Mercedes EQA or EQC or something. But
what was that? Or the CL almost, right? Of a few years back, right?
Yeah, exactly. No,
that was a polarizing car too. I always hated that car. I thought it looked like a show car when it came out, but it almost looks like a bell curve, right? Like
exactly. Yeah.
Not in a good. I feel like Porsche is the same way though too. Like a lot of the, I wasn't real crazy about the 992, right? I don't think any of us were real crazy about the 991 because the 997 was so great. But now in retrospect, the 991, especially the .2, looks fantastic, right? 992,
obviously, it's
pretty fantastic. Looks best as a Targa though.
Obviously, yeah.
No question. But it's like you think about its change in general. You know how
that's it.
How resistant or open we are to change. That applies to new car design too.
So you got the G-Wagon. They're doing an electric G-Wagon.
Yeah.
Did we like it before? Do we think it's the right thing?
Yeah. I love me a G-Wagon. I think they're great.
I can't wait till the day I have one on the drive. Whether it's electric, I still think it'll have the same presence. It's
I
miss the rumble, but
I think that's a car that's okay to be electric, and I think it would take away a little of the sort of the guilt of driving a monster like that, right? You know, I think that's a car that, you know, that it doesn't bother me in the least that it's an electric, especially if, you know, the G63, or do you remember the G65? That was even, you know, they did the last generation. They somehow shoehorned that big V12 in there, but
it fits into a parking space. It's good for the school run. It's got a bit of presence.
Yeah.
I agree. I think
little gangster. You know?
One gangster.
Alan
I know. I
and
think
were
the
talking.
electric. I think it's kind of the perfect, like the best of both worlds, because you get the presence, but you still have the sort of feel good, you know, environmentally friendly, like electric
and it's still gonna
aspect.
be a rocket ship, and it's still going to be a credible off-roader. So I think it makes sense.
Well, Alan, obviously you were at Rivian for 5.5, 6 years. We've talked about this before when you were a guest, but there's an advantage to having an electric off-roader, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can operate each wheel, with its own motor, brake each one individually, but
Yeah, and you've got the torque where you need it as well. You've got great control over, obviously, over each corner of the vehicle. And as someone said before, it's good in those environments where you want to be quiet. You want to enjoy nature. You don't want to be maybe all the time being this thunderous thing ripping up and roosting. You know, it's nice to enjoy nature as well. So, many benefits.
I dig it. Yeah. Now I'm down with the electric G. What are they going to call it though?
G?
The E-Wagon? I don't know.
G-Whiz, right?
Yeah.
There's another car called a G-Whiz.
Where?
There is?
China?
Is that only a European or UK thing, or
Maybe.
it's the tiniest thing? It's like, do you also have the Renault Twizy? It's like it's like one person car. I think it has a 2-seat.
Okay.
Maybe the second seat is behind the driver. Like in a little electric car, there's no doors. It's kind of like it's like a mobility scooter, you know, jacked up. So and the G-Wiz is the same, but with a really ugly square box that sits on top of it.
Interesting. Okay.
The G-Whiz makes you want to drive the Hyundai. It's that bad. It's that bad. Have a look when we're offline.
It's called the
true.
G-Wiz.
So is that the maker? Is G-Wiz?
I think it's Rev AI who make it, but
You know, they were
shit
out,
was taken.
they were out
Yeah.
years ago, and they just kind of owned this little bit of sort of nippy mobility, you know, sector. So, you know, they were brave, they were bold. It has its place, but
Isn't there something in the UK or maybe it's France where you can drive a vehicle like at 14, but it has to be a low power car? Is this familiar to you? Maybe it's France.
I thought France had.
So they
that.
have all these like young kids driving around in like 10 horsepower cars, which just seems like a terrible idea.
I think you don't need your license. So if, say, someo's lost their license for drink driving, they technically can still
is that
drive
what it
it.
is?
So they can get to the local tobacco winery or pub.
Right.
They can still drive these things, but you're right, they're like lawnmower, ride-on lawnmower.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, those seem like a
Well,
problem.
Like it's kind of like here with the electric bikes, with all the kids on the electric bikes who don't
Yeah.
have licenses, but they're on public roads.
It's funny because we have those here, not like you have in California. I think the bigger issue here in Denver are these like unlicensed, like 2-stroke off-road like bikes and ATVs that are, 50 of them will drive down and the police seem to ignore it and all that. But for whatever reason, when they do that on the electric bikes, it doesn't bother me nearly as much. I think to your point, Alan, right? Like if you're doing it stealthily, it's the whole story about like an electric, right? I mean, you get in a Rivian and, you can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds or whatever, but you're not making a big deal about it. And so it's somehow less obnoxious.
but then you can do, say, in Southern California, you can be cruising down the street within the speed limit, but have a pretty loud vehicle. It's still probably legal, but you will probably get pulled over.
And that's it.
So,
Yeah. Well, that's where you get into the discussion of profiling.
yeah. I apologize for my
Anyone who's watching the four of us now talking about being profiled by the police is probably like, hey, speaking of driving a loud car, I saw you in an AC Cobra, Lindsay. over
You
the
did.
weekend. Yeah.
Yes. It
just-
was a 64 289
Yeah.
Shelby Cobra that I
And
got
that's
to
the
drive.
one, right? The
Sunday evening.
289. I've heard from people who have owned both. Like the 289 is really where it's at, right?
I mean, I think so, but I haven't driven
No?
a 427 yet. So
Okay.
check back once I do that.
Right. So how this all? Because you grew up with cars like this.
I grew up with the Shelby Mustang, the GT350.
Right.
And
Okay.
Cobras were around, but I did not have access to one. So my parents
Yeah.
have been in a group called the Cobra Owners Club of Orange County for a long, like decades at this point, with the Shelby Mustang that we had. And
Yeah.
they do a car show every year, the group does, to benefit whatever charity they've chosen. And this year was the 50th anniversary of the club and the Cobra. So to celebrate, they put together what they were calling the evolution of the Cobra, and they showed the cars that inspired the Cobra, and then ended with a 64 289 and a 66 427. So they had a 1949 Ferrari 166 Barchetta. They had a 1952 Togero Low 77. Then they had a 62
I don't know
AC
what that
Bristol.
is.
I will tell you. So they had
Okay.
the 62 AC Bristol, which is from AC
Yeah.
and was the precursor to the Ace, and then they had the 64 Cobra, Shelby Cobra, and then they had a Recreation, the Daytona Coupe, and then a 66 427 Cobra. So John Togero was a designer in England, and he designed the car that became the AC Ace, which then Shelby used the chassis to create the Cobra. And John made about 7 Togeros, and so they were able to find one in Kansas City and have it join us for the show. Yeah.
Wow.
So that
Every day's
was
a
really
school day.
incredible to see.
It's
And,
incredible.
So they did. So the show was on Sunday, and the day before, on Saturday, they also had the Shelby American employee reunion. So they had a big luncheon. As many employees could, as could join us, came, and so we got to meet all of them, which was really cool. For the people that have seen Ford versus Ferrari, Charlie Agapiou was one of the original employees, and actually his brother Kerry was there. He also worked with Shelby, so I got to meet him.
Wow.
So that was
Amazing.
unexpected, really cool.
Charlie's
And-
related to a buddy of mine.
Really?
Yeah. So a buddy of mine, Luke, in the UK, shout out to Luke. His uncle is Charlie. It's Charlie
That's
Agapiou, right?
incredible. So Kerry is his uncle too, then?
Yeah, I guess. I'll
Yeah,
ask him.
I didn't know who, that he was going to be there. I knew his brother had been involved with Shelby, but just hadn't expected him to be there until he stood up, because they went around and introduced everybody, and there were a couple of the women that had worked in the office that were there. That was really cool. And so it was a really nice luncheon. And then, but Ryan, to answer your original question,
Yeah.
so they had the cars on display at this event space, Shelby Museum, called the Segerstrom Shelby Event Center in Irvine, on Saturday for the luncheon. And the Segerstroms have their own Shelby collection as well, which was there. And then Sunday before the show, we had to move all of the hero cars, which actually you can see on the poster behind me. And so I got asked to drive the 289 from the
Amazing.
Segerstrom to the show site.
Amazing. No pressure.
It was incredible. I mean, and that was the first time I'd driven the Cobra. And
Wow.
so we had our own little mini rally, because we had the Barchetta, the Togero,
Wow.
the 289 Cobra, the 427 Cobra, the Bristol, and then there was a Shelby Mustang. I think it's a 67 or 68 that was with us as well. And, just a couple minutes in, I mean, it was early morning in Southern California. We were
Yeah.
all driving together, open air, you have the engine noise, and the Cobra is actually easy to drive. So,
Really?
yeah, I was
Like light
I was
clutch?
surprised, because you
Gearbox
don't
is-
know.
Yeah.
And, after a minute or two, I went, oh my gosh, I get it.
So I have a
You
friend.
should have just
here in
kept
England.
driving.
Yeah, I was
Right?
gonna go the long way.
I could
yeah.
not stop smiling.
I have a friend who's got a Cobra here in the UK, and we've gone out in a couple of times. And it must be hard to drive because he's always sideways in it. I don't know what that is.
Well, the only thing that was interesting, and I think this would come with time, is that the pedals are so close together. I was glad that I had worn sort of slim profile shoes.
Yeah.
And so I did catch myself, looking down to make sure I had my foot on the clutch and not the brake, as I was getting used to the car. But as far as, shifting, it was a very intuitive pattern. It was an easy transmission. So when I got to California, there was a book at my parents' house for me. It had, and it was called The Ford Cobra, which is not a thing, but, neither here nor there. And it had a sticky note on it with my name. And I took it and I said, is this just like a souvenir for me? What's the story? And my dad said, well, there's a chapter in the book. It's Ken Miles talking about how to drive the Cobra. So I thought you should read it before Sunday because I've never driven one. But so I read it on Saturday. And what was funny is it's Ken saying over and over in a bunch of different ways how easy the Cobra is to drive. But also Ken Miles has extensive experience too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was really funny at one point and it was a reprint of an interview he had done. And at one point they said, do you think the Cobra is a good car to go run errands in? And he said, no. And then he qualified it by saying only because there isn't really cargo space, but it's really enjoyable. It's very fun to drive. If I'm going somewhere by myself or just my wife and I are going somewhere, absolutely, I'm going to take the Cobra because it's so much fun. And, I had pretty much the peak first driving experience because it was early in the morning. I was with an incredible collection of cars. The weather was great. It's such a fun car to drive. And then to top it all off, I didn't realize that my dad was going to be driving the 427 Cobra that we were moving. So we had, just one of those like peak father-daughter moments. I mean, we were next to each other on the road for miles and miles. We both were just grinning like fools and kind of like going back and forth. And I'm like, you cannot, it was one of those moments where you realize in the moment it's already a memory. Yeah. It was just amazing.
Is that picture on Instagram?
Not yet.
Okay, it needs to be.
I'm putting together a reel because it's so good. I mean, I have.
Okay, it's fantastic.
But it was very funny, especially living in sort of the Instagram age, because a lot of the enthusiasts are the generation above me, and I realized in the moment they're not in the social media mindset, and so we didn't have a videographer. So we were all trying to take video as we were driving, and I'm like, this is silly, but we did get some good videos.
Yeah. Well, throw it on Facebook. You'll pick up a couple of them, right?
There you go.
You know how exotic this seems, like, to someone listening to this or watching this right now, like in Iowa, not to knock Iowa, but like,
right.
Just this world of, Southern California and driving these Cobras and detective trailers on the beach.
But it is still just a driving experience, isn't it? Like that doesn't get much better than that experience. But as you're going back to what you're saying, Ryan, it's just getting out there on your own quiet roads, early in the morning, just whether it's music or without music, the sound of the engine. It's just that release, that reset, isn't it? And, it can be an expensive car. That's great because there's some special ones out there. But it really can be done in anything. Like I think you were talking earlier on about a Miata as well. Before we got on the show, it's what else could you drive to give you that sort of fun? That bang for your buck. Yep.
I felt that way driving that Mini. I think I mentioned to you guys that first gen John Cooper Works GP with the supercharger. I think I had a smile on my face the whole time, and it was such a different car even than like the GT4 behind me. The clutch was very light. The shifter was really easy. It was almost Honda-like, but. Damn it was a blast, even if I wasn't going quite as fast, and a fraction of the price. A fantastic car. And you mentioned Minis. This came to mind because have you looked at prices of like Miatas lately?
No, they're going up, are they?
Like they're like even a crummy one is $10,000 now.
Really?
At least here in Colorado. My dad had a couple, and he had one up until a couple of years ago, basically when he bought his Cayman, and he couldn't give the thing away at the time. It was during COVID and all that. And he had one of it was like the M edition or whatever. So it had like the nice leather and it was like the one to have. It was well kept. And I don't think he got more than about $8,000 for that thing. So I was shocked to see.
I'm seeing more and more in the social media scene of going out to car shows and modifying them, track days, and I still have the old 986 Boxster, and I bought that for £6,500, so what's that,
Incredible.
$8,000, and
Yeah.
I drove it the other day to it just needs to be driven, and I thought it's actually a really good fun car to drive. It's
Yeah.
very different. It's still very analog. It's got a great sound. It's the S, so I think if you're going to do a road trip, like I'm probably going to get my son insured on it so he can drive it as well, and we'll go and do road trips together. So
It'd be fantastic.
Like Lindsay and your father, it's just a moment.
Right.
So
Yep. Yeah. And
Yeah,
Dan,
and
you
it-
meant.
I mean, there's
Oh, go
there's
ahead,
something
Lindsay.
about it where, like you said, Alan, getting to experience it with your son. I mean, getting to experience it with my dad was,
Yeah.
like even in the moment, I was like, we may have peaked. Like, no
Yeah.
joke.
You need to commission an artist to do like an oil painting of that photograph you sent me. That was pretty special. Just the smiles on your faces and all that.
Right.
And Dan, you had a theory about why these NA Miatas are going up in price like they are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's unique to the NA Miatas, but I think
Yeah.
these cars that were relatively cheap get a reputation for being good handling cars. And younger generations want something that's going to handle well, something that might be able to tune, that's easily tunable. If you look it up, it's known as a drift tax, because a lot of these cars end up being drifted. It's another reason why, like the 3 Series BMW in the US, is hard to get cheap these days, because everyone just modifies them, and so it's a bandwagon that I think we've missed, but. Yeah,
you said a drift tax. What's going on there?
a drift tax.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the folks get them, modify them, and then
Yeah.
take them drifting, whether that's legal drifting or illegal drifting. There's a lot of tracks locally in Seattle where people can go and drift your cars.
So your tax goes up if you take it drifting. Like, how would they know?
No, the tax is that other people can't get the car because they've become too expensive.
It's supply and demand. Gotcha. Right.
It's those
Yeah.
kids with the curly hair in the front we were talking about in the UK, Alan. What do you, the Gottmix or whatever they're,
I'm not.
Big handbrakes.
Yeah.
the tracksuits, right?
Right.
And we definitely have those here too, but it's I don't know. Someone's buying them because it's crazy. It's not the NBs so much, right? I think looking back, those were kind of the ugly duckling Miatas, right, versus the NC and the later cars. But yeah, anyway, NA Miata, and you mentioned the BMW too, the 3 Series, the E30, right? Couldn't give those away for years,
Right.
and a
Right,
good
and
one of
those
those
have
is, oh my God, more than 10 grand for sure. It's
Well,
good
I
cars,
looked at one
not great cars.
probably 15 years ago, and it was 30,000 at that point.
Don't you have a BMW race car, Lindsay?
I have an E36 sedan
Yeah,
that I turned into
okay.
a track car. Yeah.
So E36 was the next gen.
That's the series after the E30. Yeah.
Right. So like what was that? You tell me.
I don't know. So the sedans were 07, 08.
Okay.
I have an 08.
An 08. Okay, right on.
But they make great track cars, and that's,
Yeah.
you see a fair number of them have been set up for the track.
Track tax and drift tax then.
Right.
We've missed that
Choose your
one. So
tax.
what's next? What could you buy now that's cheap?
Is
I
that
think
not-
That's a
ideally
good
manual.
question.
Is that also
Yeah.
part of the
Right.
20-year sort of rule or philosophy? So when kids grow up, 20 years later, they buy the car that, they lusted after when they were younger. Is that kind
Yeah.
of
Right.
getting into that point now as well, or?
I think that's it. So what, based on that rule, what should be in our garages right now?
Yeah, what should we be investing in
Yeah.
post-COVID?
Well, I
it's
think
crazy.
E46 BMWs are old enough at this point. People are starting to make those into track cars. That's the series after mine.
Yep. I used
Yeah.
to have the M3 version of that. It was a great
I
car.
love those.
Yeah.
Convertible.
I still miss. I mean, that was the first car I had driven with the really thick steering wheel and kind
Oh.
of the most modern, manual. And
Yeah.
holy smokes, I still miss it.
Yeah.
That was such a good car when it was new. Game changer.
I'll tell you what I think is a bit of a secret, and it's the Fiat convertible two-door. Because essentially it's a Miata,
Yeah.
but people don't realize it's a
Yeah,
Miata.
the Abarth. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
is
you
it the 500, the
The
two-door?
the 124 is it?
124, yeah. Although the
So
500
essentially,
is
it's a
cool too.
convertible Fiat,
Yep.
but it's underneath. It's a Miata.
Yep. Yep. But it's a turbo. And that's so,
Yeah.
in a place like
Oh.
Colorado, that's probably the
There
one
we
to
go.
have. And I think I can count on one hand the number of those I've ever seen driving around,
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I don't know that
They're
I've ever
pretty cool.
seen one.
They
In
didn't
the
sell
5
well.
No, but I think that's the problem with the dealer network, right?
Yeah.
Given the choice, do you want to buy and get your car serviced from a Fiat dealership or a Mazda dealership? I feel bad. Like we have a dealership here just south of Denver, and it's like, what is the lineup? It's Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Mini, I think.
That's
Like
an
Mini's
interesting
kind of
combo.
hanging on. Yeah, so they have this, of course they were made to build this giant building, right? And and now it's a lot of like trade-ins.
Keeps it
Anyway,
interesting.
keeps it interesting. Again, we've talked about this before, but I mean, who would have guessed we'd have these brands for sale in the United States right now, right?
Well, especially
I don't
when
know.
you look at the cycles that some of them have gone through,
Yeah.
Alpha, and like
Yeah.
they haven't always had something to offer.
No, and you mentioned the
Well-
500, the Fiat Abarth. Like that's a cool car too. If you've ever driven one
Yeah.
of those, that's a
It is
bargain.
great
In a,
car, but that saved FCA, didn't it? Fiat Chrysler with obviously the gas guzzlers, Dodge
Yeah,
Ram.
that's a good
They did
point.
the electric 500. They went to Bosch, said, right, we want a motor for it, and you could pick those things up. I think it was like $90 a month or something, brand new.
yeah, I
They just
remember that.
needed
Yeah.
it to offset the carbon.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Carbon footprint. So, yeah, great car.
Yeah.
Great buy.
One of the most cheaply outfitted modern cars, though, like just the quality, like you're talking about brittle plastic, right? So even if you step up and you get the high performance model, it still has like the crappy shroud around the seatbelt or the dash plastic, but what a blast to drive otherwise.
Yeah, my
Dan,
wife.
what are you
really
looking
good
at?
things about the Abarth.
She does.
Yeah, my son's partner has a Fiat 500.
No kidding.
I
Okay.
get a cheeky smile when I get in it and shoot up the shops to get some bits and pieces, and I'm, yeah. And to be honest, I try and get it on two wheels around the corner as well, but I haven't got there yet, and I'm sure it's probably a bit of a fine line before you're over. So
Please
Yeah.
tell me you've got the Gucci edition.
no, I wanted it. Just if you're going to be funny, got to be fancy. You got to go all the way, don't you? So
That's right.
No,
They probably fetch big money now, I would guess.
really.
Yeah.
The
It's
Gucci
a-
edition.
It's literally all Gucci.
Yeah.
We have bright
Down
red.
to
So
the
how many of
fabric.
those did they make? Do we know?
Not many. We got a local guy here that's got one. Kind of got it as a goof and kind of fell in love with the thing. As far as I know, that was always sort of the lesser engine and all that. And I think it has a rollback top, or you could get a rollback top, right? Like kind of like the tuna can top or whatever. But what does a Gucci bag cost?
Probably more than the car.
Great question.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, you can see the level or the amount of fabric, right, in a Gucci. People are roaming like wrecking yards in a few years just for the fabric, So, anyway,
Yeah, they're going to stow their own.
what's going
using
on? So-
parts from the car.
right, exactly. I found myself in a European wrecking yard last week for the first time in years. It was really interesting. At least the one where I went to was here in Denver. You can't just roam. For insurance purposes, you kind of have to tell them what you're looking for, and then they go. So
interesting.
I had a buddy that was looking for a hood for his B7 S4 wagon, right? I mean, it's got to be one of the, talk about a rare car. How many of those are left for a reason, right? You want to do a timing chain service on that, worth more than the car, but needed a new hood. He had a branch come down on the hood in a storm, and so we went looking. And so, online they grade the parts, and this was a grade A part. And then we get there, and again, because we can't go roam the place, you you let the Eastern European guy who owns the place what you're know what you're looking for, and he goes to get it, and about 20, 30 minutes he's cutting the thing off the car, and then he brings it to, and then we look at this thing and we realize this is worse than the hood we're trying to replace.
Oh
Right?
no!
So then you got to tell him no.
You're doing it
gives
all
you the
wrong. If
stare
he's
of
Eastern
death.
European, just give him a couple of bucks, and
Nice man. You know, it's yeah, but it was
Just get you a brand new one.
right.
enough question. So Gucci Fiat 500 is going for around £5,500. What's that?
No kidding.
$7,000. So
Yeah.
a handbag
Wow.
is more expensive. So
Yeah. We should. That's an interesting topic for an episode sometime, right? Like these mashups of like designers. Like I grew up, there was a Levi's AMC Pacer. There was like a Bill Blass, I don't know, Lincoln
Oh my
Continental
gosh.
or something.
Talk about a blast
you
from
know?
the past.
No, right?
Eddie Bauer did one.
Oh,
with a
that
Ford,
was
didn't
that was
Yeah.
arguably the most successful one, I think, right? In recent.
he? Yeah.
Well, it's so
How about a
iconic too.
Bronco?
I feel like even people
They
that
should
don't
do a new
know about-
Bronco. Yeah.
I mean, obviously. Well, they did Explorers too.
Yeah. That was definitely
Who would
like a
Bronco partner
'90s.
with? Who would Ford partner with?
LL Bean,
That's a
Land's
tough one.
End. If it wants to,
I was
if it
gonna
wants to be
say that,
similar
yeah.
to Eddie Bauer.
Crew?
What was always they were always these weird, like it wasn't always like who you think, to your point, Lindsay, right? Like who would that make sense? But it was a lot of like American Motors, right? Like I think they did a Gucci one back in like the 70s or something. Talk about like two ends of the
Gucci
spectrum.
have done this before. They did the Gucci Cadillac back in the
Ooh.
day.
Oh.
I don't know what that
Like
looks
a
like.
Seville, if I recall.
There's quite a few. Obviously, Porsche and Puma, Bulgari,
Really?
like the brand, and Fiat. But the one I really like is Lacoste and Citroen. Like two brands.
Never
that
saw
go
that,
together.
but that makes sense.
Yeah, Versace and
Yeah.
Lamborghini. This is a good one.
Really?
For so English folk will know this. Paul Smith and Mini. That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah.
They
works.
fetch good money, those minis. The
Yeah.
limited edition Paul Smith editions get really good money.
Yeah.
They're really in demand.
And Hermes and Bugatti, if anyone can afford anything from any of those.
Yeah.
So
Noticeably absent from this list, Porsche.
Porsche and Puma.
Oh, they did.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
apparently.
right.
So
Oh, okay.
let's see what it was.
Missed that one. Okay. Huh.
Well, and this was a
Guess it
very
makes
small
sense.
run, but Virgil
I guess
Abloh
New Balance
did.
and Corvette's coming up.
And there's the clip. Who
Dior.
makes jorts these days?
So we're flying into Denver to join Ryan. We are credited to the max thanks to the folks at Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, and we'll be on the mountain.
What
Yeah,
had to go
we had our
through,
safety
that's
meeting, Alan, Zoom call yesterday, which I had been on one of these before, but what did you guys think about this? Any surprises? Common sense?
I think for me, turn your camera off, Kurt. There was a dude called Kurt on this call, and he had his camera on while the safety briefing was going on. Not only could we see him on his phone, but then he was texting people, etc. So
Yeah,
you know, I totally get it, but just turn your camera off.
Doing some independent research.
Bit of zoom in.
But the guys did an amazing job with the actual briefing. You know,
Yeah,
I sit
yeah.
through a few of these sorts of briefings for different events like rally, etc. And you know, they were really comprehensive. We potentially have access. I think we have to credit, but we have access to Larry Chen's photography
Yeah.
over the weekend, right?
That's,
So that's a pretty cool thing.
he is, I
Robert
think, the
Schultz
official
as well.
photographer. Kind
Yeah.
of runs the show. Sorry, Alan, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying you're rubbing shoulders with social media royalty there. So
Absolutely. Him and Carl, wherever that guy, what was his name?
Kurt.
Kurt, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, there's some pretty big names there. It's pretty exciting. I mean, we're all looking forward to it. Can't wait.
and you're going to see a guy I worked with, Gardner Nichols, and he
Okay.
did his run last year. He's out there practicing. He's done his 2 practice weekends. So yeah,
Nice.
Oh yeah.
This is the Rivian.
yeah, exactly. He's
Yeah.
shaping his.
He's
tune.
He's an employee, right? He's not part of a works team. He's doing it off his own back.
Correct. There is getting a little bit of help from Pirelli and a little bit of help from Rivian, but fundamentally it's his own thing. So
Yeah.
it's really impressive.
Good on him.
Yeah.
He's a very, very talented driver. So yeah, go by and say hi.
Fantastic. We will. Yeah. Well, I know we've got a hard stop here, so we'll wrap this up, but we're going to have lots of amazing stories from Pikes Peak. Expect some amazing stories from you too, Alan, in the UK. I guess you guys are going to see.
Opportunity So
Yeah. You guys are going to see each other at Goodwood here coming up. So that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, we're making some plans to try and get together on Friday. So it'll be good.
FOMO for sure, but you can't do everything, right? So,
Right.
all right. Well, it's good to have everyone together. Next week, Wi-Fi is going to be back. It's going to be amazing. But it's always good to see you guys. Always good to chat. And until next time,
You guys
for
too.
the Road Show.
Until then, see you later.
Bye, guys.